Sound of the Spirit. This is a story of a Jewish girl who is preparing for her bat mitzvah. She is a Messianic Jew and is left orphaned when her father, who was a widower, finally died, suddenly died. And she is now having to move in with her relatives. And she brings her faith in the Yeshua, Jesus, the Messiah, into the Jewish community that have to engage with her. And this becomes more of a coming of age for her, which is a Jewish ritual of coming of age, the bar mitzvah. But she ends up sharing her faith through this very difficult situation. And it's a film that Michael Wolf, who's a Messianic rabbi, is seeing as an important film to reach the Jews for Christ, for Yeshua. And we took it on because it fit our mission and it was doable. I always ask, is it doable? And doable depends on both finances, whether it's attainable, reachable for us. When Michael handed me the script, Sound of the Spirit, and I finally got around to reading it, I was interested in it because it seemed like an art house film. It had a very precocious girl that, and plus it was so different in terms of a film that I've never seen a film like this. It's interesting because it was right around the time Juno came out, and there was a very precocious young lady, and I kept thinking, Sound of the Spirit, that's not the right title for this. It should be called Rivka. It should be called Rivka. But the more I thought about the theme of the movie, I realized that it really should be called Sound of the Spirit. Didn't jump in right away. I thought this would be an interesting film to do someday. But what ended up happening was I handed it to a couple people to read. Most people liked the script. I felt like there were some changes that needed to be made, and Michael was so eager to incorporate some of the ideas and changes that we were putting into it, that it was really finally the idea that if we could find the right kid to play Rivka, then we can make this movie, because it so heavily depends on that person to be able to carry the movie. So I told my team, we got to find Rivka. If we find Rivka, the movie is the kind of movie that's doable enough that it doesn't have a high concept. It's not going to cost a lot of money. But if we can get good performances in front of the camera, we get this girl to carry the movie, I would be interested in doing it. But it was not until I talked to my team, we had a meeting about it, and we pretty much put it before the Lord. If you want us to do this movie, certain things have to come together. One is that we all have to be in agreement about making this movie. So I worked towards creating an alliance of my team to come together. That means Eric Filson and his wife, me and my wife, Dave and Connie Schaefer, who are big supporters, to come together and agree to do this film. So as we approached that particular meeting, it became clear that there's still some obstacles that we needed to overcome. And for me, I was already on board. I just needed to win other people to it. So since then, Michael and I have been sort of creating this bandwagon of people being involved in the movie. And now we have people who believe in the movie. And I think that's true of most projects. There's got to be an alliance of people who want to see the movie made. And I was on board about 1.5 years ago, but I was much more on board when we found Anna Lasbury, who to me is Rivka. Sound of the Spirit fits our mission and our vision as a story because in the context of a real life situation that a character is going through, the gospel becomes the catalyst and the critical issue that brings them to either achieve or not achieve their goals, or they're transformed by it. And therefore, the kingdom of God is promoted. So it's also a very realistic story, even though we're open to fantasy. But this story is engaging in that it's about a real person going through a real difficult situation. But at the heart of it, you see the gospel. You see how Christ makes a difference in this person's life. I believe the movie is going to speak to the Christian by reminding them that Jesus was a Jew. It's going to speak to the secular non-believer by engaging them in a human interest story about a girl going through a difficult time, and how her faith helps her gain strength, and that she can actually survive a difficult situation like losing your parents. To the Jewish person, I believe the film is going to challenge their notion of who Jesus, the Messiah, Jesus, Yeshua is, and that they would be curious enough to read Isaiah and to, outside of the controversy that often follows this discussion, to be able to engage this story and say, hey, there are people who actually are messianic. There are Jews who actually recognize that Jesus was the Messiah, and it's transformed their lives. It would, hopefully, it would engage them as an interesting story that will cause them to maybe relate to that family member who has become a Christian, and at the same time cause them to maybe seek out to find out more about who Yeshua is, and that he's not just this Anglo-Saxon Western God, but that he was Jewish and he followed Jewish tradition and claimed to be the Messiah. When I first read the script and I knew what Michael was attempting here, I realized, one, that it was already built-in controversy. When you mention Messianic to the Jews, there's controversy. I also knew that independent films, by nature, have the freedom to be controversial because they're not made by the studios. And controversy is not a problem unless you have an agenda to offend. We don't have an agenda to offend here. We have an agenda to speak truth about what the messianic experience is. By their very existence, they're controversial to the Jews. But I want us to engage in a conversation with our Jewish friends about this group of people who have embraced the Messiah and are somehow being rejected as Jews. The effort of our film is to say they never stop being Jews. In fact, we call them completed Jews. The controversy of the film, hopefully, will be on the basis of the discussion being by nature controversial. But we don't want to make our film be untruthful or insulting to the Jews. In fact, if we do our job, then a Jewish person can watch the film, enjoy it, and say, well, that's just their opinion, and still enjoy the movie.